The first time I realized the dead can still answer you, I was standing in a hospital corridor that smelled like bleach and old rain. The lights above me flickered in slow pulses like a tired heartbeat, and the phone in my pocket buzzed with a voicemail from a number that had been disconnected for years. When I pressed play, I heard my own name, whispered back. If you enjoy true horror stories whispered from the dark, don't forget to subscribe, if you dare. Welcome to Mr. BlackWhisper. I didn't believe in last words until the night I worked the overflow wing. It was a small county hospital that never felt fully awake, even at noon. At night, it became something else entirely, an aquarium of dim lights and slow movements, where everyone spoke softer without realizing they were doing it. The kind of place where your footsteps sounded too loud, and every door closed like a secret. I was a security guard. Third shift. Mostly, I walked the halls, checked stairwells, watched a wall of monitors that showed the same empty corners from different angles. The machines made little noises, beeps, clicks, a distant wheeze, and when everything lined up just right, it sounded like someone breathing behind you. That night, room for B was vacant. I knew because I checked it at the top of every hour. The patient had passed earlier that week. Heart failure. Older man. No family. The nurses said he'd been polite until the end. The kind of person who apologized when he was the one suffering. At 2:17 a.m., the call light in 4B flicked on. It wasn't supposed to. The bed had been stripped, the curtain pulled back, the equipment unplugged. But the little red glow appeared on the panel at the nurse's station and stayed there, steady as an accusation. The charge nurse frowned like she didn't want to make it real. She looked at me and said something practical, something that made the moment smaller. Probably a short. Probably the wiring. Could I just go reset it? I walked down the hall with my flashlight off because the ceiling lights were enough. And because I didn't want to look like the kind of person who expected something to be waiting. Room for B was dim. The door was slightly open, though I remembered it latched. Inside, the air was colder than the hallway, a clean cold that felt pressed into your skin. I stepped in and stared at the wall panel beside the bed. The call button cord lay coiled on the mattress like a pale vein. I reset the switch. The red light clicked off. Then, behind me, the cord slid just an inch like something had tugged it back. I didn't turn around quickly. I turned around like I was trying not to wake someone. The bed was empty, but the indentation was there, shallow and human, as if someone had just shifted their weight and settled deeper. My throat went dry. I told myself it was the foam remembering. I told myself it was temperature. I told myself 1,000 soft lies. Then the hospital phone on the wall rang. Not the desk phone outside. Not the station phone. The one inside the vacant room that was only used for patient calls. It rang once, twice, 3 times, the sound bright and wrong in the quiet. I picked it up without thinking because sometimes your body answers before your mind decides. The line was cold, not silent cold. A faint hiss like distant rain. And then a voice, low and tired, said my name. Not my first name, not my last. The name my mother used when she was disappointed, when she'd look at me like she knew I was about to make a mistake. No one at that job knew that name. I didn't speak back. I stood there holding the receiver, listening. The voice whispered again, slower this time, like it had to push through something thick. It said, "Don't let them forget." The call ended. The dial tone returned, flat and indifferent. I hung up. I backed out of the room. I didn't run, because running admits there's something to escape. I walked as if I still belonged in those halls. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse asked if it was fixed. I nodded. She looked at my face and stopped smiling. "You okay?" I wanted to tell her about the phone, about the voice. But what would I say? A dead man asked me not to let them forget him, sounded like a story someone tells at a bar, not something that happened in a building full of cameras and witnesses. So I said I was fine and sat back down at the monitors. At 3:03 a.m., the camera feed 44B flickered. For half a second, the screen showed the bed with the shallow indentation again. And on the pillow feint, like a smudge on glass, was the shape of a face turned toward the door, waiting to be acknowledged. The next day, I asked the records clerk, casually, "What happened to the man from 4B? I learned something the nurses hadn't said." His file had been mislabeled for years. Wrong birth date, wrong emergency contact, wrong county. He'd been alive in the system and dead in paperwork long before his heart stopped. No one had come because no one had been told. His existence had been filed in the wrong place, like a document slipped into the back of a drawer and forgotten. Don't let them forget. I made calls on my break. I tracked down the right county. I found the correct contact, Kanice, shocked and crying, who thought he'd moved away and cut ties. She drove in 2 days later. She brought a photograph, a suit for the body that had already been cremated, and a kind of grief that looked like guilt. After she left, the call light in for B never came on again. But for the rest of my time on that shift, sometimes when I walked past room 4B, the wall phone would be off the hook, dangling slightly like someone had used it recently and hadn't bothered to hang it up. And every time I reached to fix it, I felt the same clean cold crawl into my fingers, like a handprint that didn't belong to the living. You don't realize how lonely a highway can feel until you're on it at 1 a.m., with nothing ahead but darkness and the pale sweep of your own headlights. I was driving back from a late shift, the kind that drains you until you start thinking in slow motion. The radio couldn't find a station. My phone had one bar, then none. The world outside the windshield was just trees and empty exits, like the earth had decided you didn't need witnesses. About 20 miles from home, I saw a woman standing on the shoulder. No hazard lights, no car. Just her, facing the road, hands at her sides like she'd been placed there. I slowed without meaning to. It's instinct, the old human part of you that says, don't leave someone alone in the dark. She turned her head toward my car, and the reflected light caught her face. She looked wet, not rain wet, like she'd come out of water and forgotten to dry. I pulled over. I rolled the window down halfway. Cold air poured in, sharp enough to make my eyes sting. She stepped closer, but not too close. The way you approach an animal you don't want to startle. I asked if she needed help. My voice sounded too loud, too normal. She didn't answer right away. She looked past me at the passenger seat, as if someone was already sitting there. Then she leaned in just enough that I could smell her. Not perfume, not sweat, river mud. Old leaves, that mineral scent of deep water. She said, very softly, "You shouldn't stop here." I stared at her. I asked where her car was. I asked if she was hurt. I asked questions because questions are a way to keep control. She blinked slowly, and her eyelashes clumped together like they were still damp. "They didn't see me," she whispered. "They never see me." Her gaze shifted again to the passenger seat. Her lips barely moved when she said, "Tell him to look." A semi roared past in the right lane, shaking my car. The wind rocked me on the shoulder. I flinched, and when I looked back, she was gone. Not walking away, not behind me, not crouched near the guardrail. Ouch. Just gone, like she'd stepped out of reality when I wasn't looking. My skin tightened with that specific fear you get when you realize the rules just changed and no one warned you. I pulled back onto the highway. I drove, hands locked on the wheel. 2 miles later, I saw the flashing lights. A wreck. A car crumpled against the guardrail like it had tried to fold itself small. The front end was gone. A state trooper waved traffic around the debris. Beyond him, down the slope, I saw the dark glint of water and overflow ditch swollen from recent storms. A man stood on the shoulder, arms wrapped around his own chest, shaking as if the cold had gotten inside his bones. He looked like he'd been pulled from sleep and thrown into a nightmare. He kept staring down the slope, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to speak, but couldn't find the shape of the words. The trooper talked to him, loud and firm. The man nodded too fast, then looked down again as if he couldn't help it. "Tell him to look. I don't know why I stopped. I don't know why I parked farther up and walked back. Maybe because I already felt involved, like something had reached out and hooked me." The man's eyes met mine, briefly wild, empty, pleading, without permission. I stepped closer and said, gently, "Hey, look." He blinked at me as if the word hit something. Then, like he was obeying a command, he turned his head toward the ditch. And he started screaming. Down below, half hidden by reeds and shadow, was a pale arm caught in the weeds, moving with the current like it was waving. Rescue divers arrived fast, but not fast enough to change what had already happened. Later, when the trooper took my statement, he asked if I'd seen anyone on the shoulder earlier. I hesitated, then told him about the woman. His pen stopped. He looked up slowly. "What woman?" I described her. The wet hair, the old-fashioned coat, the mud smell. His face tightened in a way that wasn't disbelief. It was recognition he didn't want. He said quietly, "A girl died here last year. Hit and run. They never found who did it. Witnesses said they saw her standing on the shoulder right before it happened, like she was waiting." I drove home afterward with my windows up, heat on, music playing. None of it helped. Because every time I looked at my passenger seat, I kept expecting to see wet fabric and a face turned toward the road, making sure I understood. And for weeks after, whenever my phone lost signal on that stretch of highway, my screen would light up with a missed call. No number, no name, just the time, 1 a.m. I moved into my grandmother's house after the funeral because no one else wanted to deal with it. They called it handling the estate, but what they meant was touching her things. Deciding what mattered, throwing away the parts of her life that were inconvenient to store. The house was old and quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It felt held, like the rooms were listening. My grandmother had lived there alone for 30 years. Everyone said she was stubborn, that she didn't want help, that she liked the solitude. I believed them until I started sleeping there and heard how the house behaved at night. Not creaks, not settling. A softness in the hallway, as if someone padded barefoot from room to room with patience. On the third night, I woke to the sound of the kitchen chair moving. A slow scrape, wood on tile. I lay still, eyes open, waiting for the second sound that would make it rational. A mouse, a draft, my own imagination. Instead, I heard the cabinet doors open, one by one, not slammed. Just opened like someone knew exactly what they were looking for. I got up because lying in bed made me feel like prey. The hallway was darker than it should have been. The moonlight through the window didn't reach the floor. It stopped halfway, as if the darkness had weight. In the kitchen, the chair sat pulled out from the table, angled like someone had just stood up. I walked in. I turned on the light. Everything was normal in the harsh brightness. Cabinets shut, chair still, counters empty. Except the phone. The old landline handset was off the hook, resting on the counter as if someone had set it down mid-call. I didn't remember touching it. I picked it up and listened. The dial tone was there, but underneath it was a faint clicking like breathing through teeth. Then I heard a voice. Not over the line, not from the receiver, from the pantry door behind me. A whisper, so close it raised the hair on my neck. It said, "Don't eat it." I turned slowly. The pantry door was closed. The knob was still. The space under the door was black. I didn't move toward it. I set the phone back on the hook with shaking hands. I stood there, listening for another whisper, another scrape, Anything to prove it wasn't only me. Nothing came. In the morning, I tried to laugh it off. Told myself grief makes your brain weird. I told myself old houses have moods. I made coffee, and I reached into the bread box for the loaf I'd bought the day before. It was open, the twist tie untied. And inside the first slice, pressed deep into the soft white, were 3 small pins, like sewing pins. The kind my grandmother kept in a tomato-shaped cushion. I stared until my eyes hurt. My stomach rolled. If I'd made toast half asleep, if I'd bitten without looking, I dumped the whole loaf into the trash. Then I stood over it like I expected it to move. That day, I went through the house more carefully. I found the tomato cushion in a drawer, missing exactly 3 pins. I found a cookbook open on the counter, though I hadn't touched it. The page was marked with a note in my grandmother's handwriting. Never take food from him. Him, I didn't know who him was. I didn't know what she meant until I found the other thing. Behind the pantry, there was a narrow door I'd never noticed. It looked like part of the wall, painted the same color, the seam hidden under old trim. When I pried it open, stale air spilled out, heavy and sweet, like something had been closed too long. Inside was a crawlspace that ran under the stairs. And in that crawlspace, neatly stacked like someone had been saving them, were dozens of empty bread bags. All the same brand, all with the same small tiers near the opening. And beside them, a rusted lunchbox filled with pins. My mouth went numb. I backed out and shut the hidden door, hands trembling so hard I missed the latch twice. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with all the lights on, listening to the house breathe. At 2:40 a.m., the pantry doorknob turned, slowly, carefully. The door opened a crack, and the darkness inside pushed forward like it wanted room. A voice came through the crack low, patient, familiar in the way nightmares feel familiar. It said, "She can't stop me now." My throat tightened around a sound. My hands were ice on the table. Then, from the hallway behind me, another whispered name urgent, aching with effort. My grandmother. Not the pantry, she breathed. Not the pantry. I stood up so fast the chair fell back. I didn't look toward the pantry again. I walked backward to the front door with my eyes on the hallway, on the shadows, on the places a person could stand. The pantry door stayed open just a crack. And from inside, something made a soft clicking sound against its teeth, like it was smiling in the dark. I left the house that night and never slept there again. The estate got handled by professionals after that. Locks changed, doors sealed, everything made clean and reasonable. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep in my own apartment, I smell bread. Fresh, warm, inviting. And I remember those pins waiting inside the soft white like tiny, quiet promises. There's a kind of job you take when you're broke that makes you feel like you've stepped out of the world. Night receptionist at a mortuary transport service. It sounds official. It sounds like paperwork and phone calls. In reality, it's you in a small office behind a garage, listening to radios crackle, watching trucks come and go, and answering calls from hospitals and nursing homes that speak in hushed, exhausted tones. You learn to recognize the silence on the other end of the line. The moment someone decides to say the words, "We have a pickup." That's what they say. Like the body is a package. Like it's easier that way. One night, around 4 a.m., the office phone rang. The caller ID flashed a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm and precise. She gave an address. She gave instructions. She gave a name. Then she paused, and I heard something behind her wind, maybe, or distant traffic. And she said, "Please, don't leave me alone." It wasn't dramatic. It was the most human thing I'd heard all night. I told her we'd send someone. I asked who I was speaking to so I could note it properly. She hesitated, then said, "You won't find me in your system." My stomach tightened. "Ma'am, is this an emergency? Are you?" She cut me off softly, like she didn't want to waste time. "I'm already there," she whispered. "I'm the reason you're coming." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver, waiting for the dial tone to return. When it did, it sounded far away, like the phone was underwater. I called the dispatcher. I relayed the address and details, trying to keep my voice normal. He didn't ask questions. He just sent a crew. An hour later, the driver called in. His voice was different. Not scared, exactly. It's more like someone who'd seen a rule break and didn't know where to file it. He said there was nobody there. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He swallowed. "No staff, no family. The address is an abandoned hospice. Been closed since last winter." My hands went cold on the desk, but the call he exhaled through his nose. "We found a body, female, old, lying on a gurney in the dark like she'd been placed there. No paperwork, no tags." I couldn't speak. My throat felt packed with cotton. Then he said, very quietly, and when we rolled her out, her phone was in her hand. I stared at the office phone as if it might confess. "What phone?" I whispered. He paused. "A landline handset, like the kind attached to a wall." She was holding it like she'd just finished calling someone. My vision narrowed. Calm, precise. And then the one moment of naked fear. "Please, don't leave me alone." When the crew returned, I watched them unload the stretcher through the office window. The overhead lights in the garage washed everything in sterile yellow. The body bag looked like every other body bag. Until the driver unzipped a corner to check the ID bracelet. Her hand was visible, pale and slack, and curled in her fingerstight like she'd refused to let go was our office phone's exact model of handset. The same scuffed plastic, the same faded label slot, except ours was still on the hook. I didn't sleep after that. I didn't quit immediately either. I told myself coincidences happen. I told myself grief leaves echoes. I told myself anything that let me keep showing up. But from that night on, once per shift, the office phone would ring exactly once. If I answered, there was only a breath on the line, soft, relieved, like someone had found you in the dark. If I didn't answer, the light on the phone would blink for hours afterward, as if the missed call mattered. I lasted 3 more weeks. On my final night, before I locked the door and walked away for good, I leaned close to the receiver and whispered, "I'm sorry." The line was silent for a long time. Then something on the other end whispered back, so faint, I almost convinced myself it was only the static. "Thank you." And as I left, the office phone rang once again, patient, inevitable. Like the dead had learned my number by heart.